Welcome to Your Business, Your Life with Matt DiFrancesco, your personal financial technician. Whether you've had years of success in your business or just starting out, Highlift Financial can help you create a vision for your business, life, and family, and align these for generational wealth. So as they say, what happens in your life affects your business. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Life with your host, me, Matt DiFrancesco. Hey, just got back from a leadership conference in Las Vegas that my coach was running and just got some really great information. I'm hoping in one of the upcoming podcasts, I can share some of the information that I learned out there. But today I've got a really great guest. His name's Jacob Tilzer. I think I got close enough on that. So it's Jacob Tilzer. He's the founder of Kaizen Collision Center. It's a 50 location MSO, which really prides itself on high quality customer service. And it's funny because as we were talking earlier, when we were kind of doing the intro call, he said that's really an overused term. So I'm kind of interested to pick his brain on this idea of superior customer service. They provide a scale of a larger shop, but with the feel of a smaller shop, which I think is really important these days because, I think as businesses get bigger, sometimes they get very impersonalized. So having this feel allows him to provide their customers with a personalized experience. He offers things like shuttle services, daily updates to the customers on whether the repair is going. And those are just a few things. So I'm hoping he's going to highlight some of those. But so Jacob, like I said, he's experienced a high level of success at a young age. So I'm excited for him to tell his story and explain exactly what they do. So Jacob, welcome to Your Business, Your Life.
Hey, I appreciate that. And thank you for having me.
No problem.
I don't think we have enough time to tell the whole story, but we can definitely touch on it, I think, at a high level. I'm an open book for you. So whatever questions you might have, it's kind of what people know me for is probably pretty blunt and upfront. So whatever you ask, I'll give you the background to kind of what I've got. But yeah, we're sitting close to 50 locations today, which doesn't mean anything special other than we've just got a lot of work to do. So yes. Going from one location, we really focused on getting super efficient and then expanding outward and then acquiring other operations and trying to bring the whole platform fluid. And some days it feels like whack-a-mole. You get things dialed over here in this one state and then, something pops off in another state. So it's quite the juggling act at times.
I can imagine, especially when you got ultimate multiple states. How many states are you in now, Jacob?
We are in 6 states now, about to enter our 7th state with next month.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, and I'm sure that's exciting, but it can have its logistical challenges too. So,
yeah, well, I was going to say, logistically, part of our growth thesis was to kind of stay this Midwestern stronghold. So, we didn't initially go from like Arizona over to Florida. So, we went from Arizona a couple hours over to California. And then, for where we were in Arizona, we just kind of expanded a few hours around. And then initially, getting to where we got to, I wanted us to be pretty border connected. Right. That theory is changing a little bit now with some stuff we've got coming down the pipeline.
Okay.
But yeah, our initial company thesis was to stay somewhat geographically close. So we weren't dealing with it. Also the element of, logistics and trying to coordinate all that.
Oh, of course. So before we get into a lot of that stuff, I wanted you to kind of highlight, because I explained in the intro, you've had a high level of success and you're young guys. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see. Can you tell the audience a little about how you got into the industry and how it kind of evolved to where you are now?
Sure. So if I go back to my first earlier days, I grew up at the drag strip. So the family I had grown up with, we were around drag racing. So I was always not necessarily a gearhead, but I knew cars, right? Mm-hmm. I knew what an engine block was. I knew a little bit about tuning. And again, the family I had grown up with had been in business as well. So I kind of got a hybrid at a very young age of both. Getting into the collision side, that wasn't my initial path. So I had gone to school and I had finished up high school fairly early. Prior to high school, I had quite a few high school credits. So my junior year of high school, I had a lot of free time. I had really only gone into class for about an hour because I was pretty far ahead. So I joined a vocational school for automotive to fulfill the second half of my day. And then I had worked 2 jobs at night after that. So I'd go to school for an hour or 2 hours, whatever the course was. And then I went to vocational school for automotive, I think until probably about 2. And then I worked a job from 3 to about 5:36, and then another one from about 6:30 till about midnight. So that was my life, junior and senior years of high school. So that was my introduction, I guess, formally to working in the career field of auto. Mm-hmm. I was going to go down the dealership path, but like most guys, we ended up in a body shop, and body shop will use all the resources you can give it. So
right. Is that exactly?
I had done an internship while I was at the vocational school with a local dealership, and I tried it out and just wasn't really liking the feel, and I ended up starting sweeping floors in a body shop.
Okay,
and that was how it started.
Isn't that amazing? I think that's the thing that amazes me in the collision business. There's so many guys that started that way, just sweeping floors and just kind of working their way up. So
yeah,
you mentioned, and this was something that was interesting. I didn't put this in my notes, in my outline, but so your name, this Kaizen Collision Center, and you mentioned that it's a combination of Japanese terms. So how did this come about?
So if I go back to my first introduction to it, I was more introduced to the lean process more than Kaizen. I had worked for a company in Arizona that I think at the time they were one of the innovators in the industry of going from, your traditional body shop, mm-hmm. Stuff everywhere, sparks flying, 9 different cars on one parts rack, no real process to, came in 1 weekend, from floor tape and paint to just, completely wipe the whole shop out. And they were very successful at it. It was very new to us, but at a time in my career, it was pretty instrumental because I got to see both faces of the industry.
Okay.
And diving more into lean, I had always kept lean close to my heart and kind of how I grew. But when you study lean principles or you look for lean visual indicators, you'll always see Kaizen pop up somewhere. So, Kaizen was a theory, is a Japanese theory to continuously improve on a daily basis. And in theory, a bunch of small changes end up leading to a really big change. And if you're making changes for the better, you end up with a really good product.
Yeah.
So when I got the company going, I had done some research and I didn't see anybody was using the name. And I said, you know what? I think that'll give us an outlier, right? Because I had seen it connected to so many things in the business. It's been kind of cool because we've been able to create almost a synonymous feel with Kaizen and actually our group versus what it used to be known for in the business. So, but people that know what it means find it pretty cool. So
that's pretty neat. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if the average consumer would know, but I'm sure within the industry, it's probably, it could be something that's appealing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So tell me, so you started sweeping floors and then just basically worked yourself up to the shop and ended up buying it. Is that how we kind of evolved?
No, well, no. So, okay. I was always a growth-minded guy. Yeah. I've always continued to grow from the earliest age. I had worked for a company out here in Arizona who I still remember it to this day. The owner, I was always an ask for opportunity instead of ask for raises. Like, show me what more I can produce and I'll do it and prove my value to you. And I remember I had gone to this shop owner and I said, hey, I think I have a skill set that's being underutilized. I have a pretty extensive background in mechanical. I went to school for mechanics and I'm looking to see if I can offer anything else. And at the time I was a detailer, porter / shop cleanup guy. And I'll never forget, he told me, he said, people in my company, they don't move up. I hire people, I plug them in a hole and that's where they stay. And they either stay there or they go out. And, needless to say, this guy has since sold his business. So after I had heard that, I'd never been one to let people restrict kind of, a scenario that I'm in or whatever it was that I was trying to achieve. And I went and applied at another facility and landed a good job there. And I went from one shop to another where I was always able to max out my skill set and ability. And as long as I was learning, I felt good about it. I ended up with a company that, for as young as I was at the time, it was probably 2021. Okay. He said, hey, if you'd take this opportunity and you'd go move over here, you could pretty much run the show. Mm-hmm. And I was always more of a leader. So wasn't intimidated by the idea and just went and took on the challenge.
Right.
And taking on that challenge, I ended up in a rural market that the shop I ended up at was failing miserably. Spent some years there, turning it around, applying a bunch of lean principles, getting the culture right with the staff. And after, nothing I would say in collision ever goes on autopilot. But when I kind of felt that, hey, I'm in a rural market, we've got the building maxed out, it's producing the most it can, customers are happy, the culture's good, I was feeling a little bit, like I was also being held back. So I had left that company and ended up back in the valley, and I was getting calls from vendors and other people in the town where I was working, and half the staff that was working for me at the shop said, hey, if you go, we're going to go. And I said, well, I'm going 2.5 hours the other way. So,
oh, wow.
and most of them did end up coming with me. Wow. And that was kind of where I realized, if you're driving culture, people will follow you anywhere. And I didn't have to ask anybody to. And next thing I know, I ended up trying this thing on the side, not knowing if it was going to work or not. I actually kept my job for about 6 months because right out of the gate, I started with employees, and
right,
being in business young, I was able to understand that, if you're constantly the one that's working in the business and making it work, it's a pretty risky business because right, as I used to tell people in the early days, if I get hit by a bus, what are you going to do tomorrow? You got to be able to think for yourself,
right.
You're not always going to make the right decisions or ones that I agree with, but at least you're going to make a decision and we can either applaud it or coach off of it. So ended up back in that town. Like I said, I kept that job for about 6 months and it just started going gangbusters. And I finally had enough wind to put in my notice and go all in. And ironically, the last shop that I worked in, I ended up taking that building over, and it's now a Kaizen location. So it's actually kind of went full circle, pretty crazy. But yeah, and then went back to Yuma, went all in, pure customer acquisition. I didn't go to one carrier and say, hey, I've got this thing, like, can you send me a bunch of customers? I mean, one of the things that I noticed working for a couple of the larger companies in the industry is customers weren't really treated as if their business mattered. It was, I get 8 a day from this insurance company. I'm going to get 8 today. I'm going to get 5 tomorrow. I'm going to get 4 the next day, 3 and 2. So
right,
it was almost taken for granted. And I watched a lot of like customer experience related items get stepped over quite a bit, and putting my head down in this town and just really going to work. I mean, it was one great conversation that led to another that ended up, circulating to some people that were able to make the right decisions. Believe it or not, our first contract wasn't an insurance contract. It was a contract with the government, and kind of going through that restriction and regulation, it was just a really good gig for us in the beginning.
Isn't that interesting? You talked about this. We were talking about this idea of superior customer service, and you were just like, that's an overused term. And I wanted you to really kind of highlight on that, because I think too many times we do throw this thing. It is like a buzzword, but what does it mean? And I don't think anybody really knows what it means. And so I kind of wondered for Kaizen, what does that actually mean? Or how do you want to execute this? Yeah.
I gotta probably be a little bit careful here, because I'm even going through a current evolution in my own company, right? Because we're getting much bigger, and to get the message out and to move the needle at a macro level, it's a much harder thing to do when you're sorting through, 1,000 people. So for me, I had always, and I had said this years and years ago, but customer service, and it's evolved now so much that customer service isn't something you give. It's expected now, right? It's expected to be a part of the experience. But that was what I would tell people. Hey, you got to focus on the experience, because if we're just focusing on good customer service, that's what every other company's focusing on, right? You can fix a car and give great customer service. That doesn't mean the experience was great, so probably realizing more that, everybody's human, and trying to put a personable way to connect with somebody, not here, drop off your keys, sign this form, we'll fix your car, we'll call you with a couple updates, you pick out, very transactional. Yes. Versus asking how the kids are doing, or, the dog was in the car during the accidents, the dog doing, but I mean, just little things like that just kind of focus on the things that people remember, right. Transactional things are something we go through every single day, but if you can find a way to make a small impact on the experience, they'll never forget you.
Oh yeah.
And somebody can have a bad experience, but you have the ability to potentially turn that around. I can tell you some of our worst experiences where we've completely failed, through being genuine and not so boilerplate, and just being personable with people. People understand that we're human, right? And we're going to make mistakes. That's how we acquire 99% of all of our customers. Somebody on one end of the stick made a really bad mistake.
Right.
They've turned around to be some of our best long-term customers, because it's not always about when it's going good, right? It's about what happens when it doesn't go right, and how you react, and the things you do.
Right.
And I think that's what solidifies a lifelong customer.
Yeah, that's, it's interesting. I remember reading an article one time. They talked about medical malpractice suits, and they said they actually did a study, and they found out that the docs that got sued, it had nothing to do with their competency and everything to do by their bedside manner.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to what you're saying. I mean, because stuff's going to go wrong. I mean, you give them an estimate, you tear apart a vehicle, all of a sudden we found things internally, that have to be done. I think even just the fact that maybe sometimes the insurance companies are saying, here's what we want done, but you're like, well, this is maybe the right thing. We've got to navigate these things. And I think doing those little things, like you said, can make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. You got to make it somewhat memorable on the good side. And that's what they'll remember you for. That one little thing where maybe you remembered the daughter's name, or you remembered they were dropping their car off before they went on a trip, and just asking them how it went when they come in. It's when you can connect with somebody more, it becomes less transactional and almost less about the repair. Right. Most people aren't car repair experts. They most of the time don't want to hear all about it either. They just want their life back to normal.
Isn't that the biggest thing? And so, and I know one thing, and looking on your website, you give regular updates to, like, text updates, I assume, to the customer.
Yeah, I would say that's probably more boilerplate. If I'm being honest, we always, through the systems and the tools that we have, we try, but, with the administrative burden pressures there are nowadays in collision repair, I would say our number one complaint comes from that one phone call that was missed, or that one last update that didn't make it and the guy knew it. That feeling when you get home at night and you're like, I know I forgot something, but it's just not clicking right now. And
right.
The next day you're like, oh, I forgot to call Miss Jones, or whatever it was. Our people are busy,
Oh, yeah.
So we definitely try to do our best within the given landscape, for sure.
I think that's a key thing. I had one client of mine, I had taken I forget what happened, but I had to take my car for repair, and I got the car back, and the next day he calls me and he says, hey, how was your repair and everything? And I'm like, great. And we got chatting, and I'm like, I said, I figured because he was a client of mine, he was just checking in. He goes, no. He goes, I do this on every repair. He, the owner, was calling, just make sure everything was okay. Anything that we, any problems, anything that we could do differently in the future. And I thought that was very proactive on his part. So I think anytime with the little things that we can do can make a huge difference.
Definitely. I agree with that.
So you've expanded, you're at 50 locations, but I'm getting a sense that, like, if you're looking at expanding to a new location, there's certain qualities within that shop that you may be looking for. Is that true? And if so, what would those be?
Yeah, everybody that has known me, I've always been much more of a selective, I know what I want type mentality. You have a business, right? And you try to line a lot of those core competencies and practices up with each other. So, and we've stepped out of those, initial boundaries, but we've got the bulk of, things we look for. And I wouldn't say it's too untraditionally different than most companies that are looking to grow. Some of them might not know that that's their buy box, or some of them, the industry with how much money is circulating around right now looking for a home. Yeah, I personally feel a lot of the money that's in this business right away wants to see an income statement, wants to see net earnings, and then wants to start negotiating on a purchase price. And that's just, I mean, we don't have a current capital restriction, so it doesn't really matter the purchase price at the moment. We have what we want to pay, but I try to make sure that we're lining the correct culture, because growth and acquisition is hard. And
Yeah.
anybody that wants to paint this picture for you online or release all these articles that, oh, we just opened up another store and it's great and it's beautiful. They didn't tell you that 10 people quit, the week they came in. They didn't tell you that,
Right.
they don't tell you the bad about it. And I'm not saying we have a lot of people quit. Well, I'm pretty prideful that we end up retaining a lot of people, but it's more for us. Our thesis has just been slightly different, because I came from a pure customer acquisition, just taking care of the customer, earning good referrals through different channels, and not taking it for granted. I've kind of held that close to our thesis. And I typically will look at a company and go, okay, they have, X amount of people. How involved is the owner? How uninvolved is the owner? How do they feel about him? Because part of the thing with acquisition is the former owner, whether they're staying on with us or not, has to convey the message to his people that this is what he's chosen to do. And if he doesn't have a good ship behind him, or people that believe in him or have had a high level of respect for him, again, it's going to go back to transactional, right? Like, all right, well, if you're out, I'm out. I got no reason to stay. But when some people feel they're connected to the legacy of what's being handed on, we try not to change a ton of things in that viewpoint of we want to change the feel in here with the group. There's always this burdened feel of, hey, the suits have just gotten here and the black Tahoes are arrived and these guys are coming in with their briefcases, and now we're big corporate owned. I mean, I'm a white t-shirt wearing, so unorthodox. Like, let's just talk about cars. Let's figure out the pain points together. We're humans. You can throw stuff at me. We've built a lot of process, for where we're at, but we're still in the people business, right? So making it feel transactional is very off-putting to some people. And then also for some people, they just don't want to work in that environment, regardless if it's good or a good process or not. They want to work for a small independent, and that's okay too. At least the sooner you can get to what people actually want personally, you can help see if it aligns with you professionally.
Right. And I think this idea of culture is huge. It's so funny because it keeps coming up on all the guests that I'm talking about. And what I'm finding even with the clients that I'm working with is that, the greater and deeper that we can develop a culture, the more first off, you develop loyalty, but I think that then spills out into the customer experience. It becomes a mindset.
Well, I mean, developing the culture, right? Every company's got a culture. It's just what culture does the company, practice? We've always practiced. I saw this on the side of a shipping truck, a little freight liner. I can't remember the name of the company, but I wanted to patent it. Big letters on the side. It said, big enough to serve, small enough to care. Right. And that's always something I've held dear to me, right? Because I want people to know that, hey, we're still small enough in mindset where we're gonna make mistakes and we're gonna fail, right? But we're also big enough to serve, to where we can afford to buy the equipment. We can afford to, staff a couple extra people if needed to relieve some pressure on some people, but not lose that smaller feel that people enjoy working for. And when you start getting of scale, to manage the two is quite an art form. because even if I want to tell somebody we're a small company still, they go, well, we heard you guys are somewhere around 50 locations. Sometimes that image just, isn't there for people anymore, but I'm still here. I'm still the guy. And every person that I've hired and put in I would say our executive leadership chair, embrace that as a core philosophy and foundation.
Right. I don't know if you read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willett.
Yeah, I hadn't read it, but I know a lot of Jocko's work. I've had a whirlwind of a time with books lately. I've been trying to get dialed back into them just from a standpoint of I had read somewhere around 200 some books in a 2-3 year window, and all around business and personal development and growth. And I tell you what, man, every book that I've opened the last 2 years in that same category, I've gotten a couple different ones, a couple good ones, but it's a lot of the same regurgitated messages. I mean, you got to go back to some of the founding books like Think and Grow Rich or How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you just take a couple of those books from the early days, right? They all say the same message. They lead to the same thing, right? So there's some deviations of it, but I mean, there's so much that crosses over into each other.
Oh yeah, but it's actually funny. My son, he was a graduated with a biomedical engineering degree, and he was doing procurement, which is supply chains, and eventually he wants to start his own company. And I said, well, he hated his job in procurement. So I said, your next job needs to build on your skill set. And I said, you really need to look at sales and marketing. So he gets this book, this red book. I've never even heard of it before, but How to Sell, and he's not learning anything out of it. So I give him the book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success Through Selling by Frank Betcher, which was written like 1934. And, like the first chapter is to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. I mean, it's just simple little principles, but I think you're right about that. I brought up Jocko's book because, he talks a lot about and how the Navy SEALs do a bottom-up leadership. So it's the top leader has all the accountability, and it's extreme ownership is just, it always comes back to you, but how then they push down the leadership so that it filters the top. And I would think it's from what you're explaining about how your organization works, I think kind of indirectly you apply that type of principle.
That's right. I mean, we obviously have our leadership, but I do believe that it doesn't matter. It's going to trickle down to the ground floor. And I do believe that it always flows to the top, even if an organization wants to stop it at middle management or blame it on this one department. Still the department that the CEO has to lead, right? So I've always been a big believer in that. So and sometimes that's tough when things aren't going the best, right? Because extreme ownership, right? You got to own it in the good days and the bad days. Everybody wants to have the great days, but when the bad days pop up, as a CEO, you can't go hide in the office and just shut the door and shut your phone off. It doesn't work like that. So
exactly. And it's about leading our people. It's about leading our customers. It's about leading our family. So, I think the more accountability that we can take, the better off we are. So,
but letting people know it's okay to fail and make mistakes. I had sent an email probably 6 months ago to my staff. I had one executive that was being really hard on a manager for failing in a couple areas. And it was shortly after we had done an acquisition of this location. And I had just kind of reaffirmed to them that, hey, the fact that they're failing right now sooner is a better thing. We do want people to fail as fast as possible. So it shows what we need to work on. So it shows where the flaws are in our process.
Right.
And if through accountability, we've been able to expose issues sooner than later, that actually means things are working better. It's better to figure it out sooner than go 6 months down the road and find out that, things are being hidden from you, or this guy was too afraid of the corporate culture to voice what the issues were or to raise concerns, right?
Yeah.
So we have a very vocal organization that we promote. We want to know from the bottom up what we can do to get better. We can't always deliver on it immediately, but we do want people to have their voices heard.
Right. And you know what? You'll never know what you learn from somebody else, especially boots on the ground. They're going to have the best feel. We were talking about culture and just how you develop that and this idea of the bottom up. Is there anything specific within I mean, is there any specific things maybe within these shops that you're looking to acquire that you look from a cultural standpoint that would make it a good fit? I mean, I'm looking more, we kind of talk some generalities. I wanted to see if there's anything specific.
So just as we were talking, right?
Right.
Top down, bottom up.
Right.
You can get a real sense of the people that you're acquiring, based on some of the character of the owner, right? Through the diligence process, you learn a lot about people, and, sometimes you have to ask tough questions, and, you see all kinds of faces of people, and typically my favorite kind of guy is just that super open, honest, genuine guy. And that's why his people are supporting him, and those are going to be the ones that support the transaction and the transition, and versus a high turnover door, and everybody knows the guy to be out for everybody, or culture, just making sure they took care of their people, being a guy that I still have my first 5 employees working for the company still, and that's, some of them are moved around at different shops, but I really pride myself on that part. So some of this growth has been like tough for me personally, because some of it's transactional. Some, I'm never going to always be able to be that guy for everybody, but I am trying to be a good leader and show people that I do care. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit harder to get the message out to such a large group of people, but hopefully through podcasts and these type of things, maybe that helps push the message throughout the company,
Yeah. And I think it does help. And I think, again, if you're pushing it down, even from the areas that you can control, that it's all going to filter down. I think it's just keeping that messaging consistent the whole way around. So, Jacob, I'll tell you what, we could go on. I mean, but I love talking culture. I love talking leadership, all that stuff. Maybe I'd love to maybe have you on again, and we can dive deeper into this idea too. If you're open absolutely. To that. So sounds good. So for people to find you, where should they? We're going to put this all in the show notes, but if you just want to kind of give a little plug where they can find you guys.
Yeah, I'm always open by email. It's my first initial last name at KaizenCollisionCenter.com, J Tilzer, Tilzer at KaizenCollisionCenter.com. Doesn't matter what it's about. I'm always open for a conversation or an email. Yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Okay. I throw my number out, but it's in my email. So
and that's probably the best. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. So just email, and you can also go to your website, KaizenCollision.com. Yep.
And I do read every email that comes through our website, believe it or not. That's another way I've been able to keep a pulse on my business. You can email directly in, and I've never gotten rid of that mailbox or assigned it to somebody else. So an email that comes through the website, where it's a lead, a complaint, an application, it's part of my daily fulfillment. So I'm the one that reads them and distributes them if necessary.
That's cool. Yeah. So, and again, we'll have all this in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about writing this down if you're driving to this.
No big deal.
So no problem. So thank you, Jacob. I just love talking with you, and I know we could just go on and on about this stuff.
Sure.
But I appreciate you having you on. And the last thanks goes out to you, the listening audience. Thank you for listening to Your Business, Your Life with me, Matt DiFrancesco. If you've not subscribed to the podcast, please click on the subscribe button below. That way, when a new episode comes out, it'll download directly to your device. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to any of the podcast channels and you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review. That way we can start to get these great guests out to more people. With that, again, I want to say thanks for listening. And from everyone here at High Lift Financial, make it your best day every day. And we'll see you guys again real soon. So take care and God bless. Hey, I really want to thank you for listening to the Your Business, Your Life podcast. If you want to be notified when new episodes become available, click the subscribe button below.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of High Lift Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investment, legal, or tax advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified professional with any questions you may have regarding your business or personal planning. DiFrancesco Financial Concierge, LLC, DBA High Lift Financial, is a registered investment advisor. Registration with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission or any state security authority does not imply a certain level of skill or training.